Hi, my name is Kelly Hannick, and I just wanted the opportunity to share my story of recovery with you today. Like I said, my name is Kelly, and I work at Montana State Hospital as a peer support specialist there out at Warm Springs. And I wanted to share my story and how I came into recovery and how I came into doing this work as a peer supporter. But first I have two questions, and they were questions that were really my own questions. And I'm an existentialist at heart. So I just want you to keep them in the back of your mind as we talk about my story, and hopefully the questions will be answered at the end of my story. So the first question is why? Why me? Why the pain? Why the suffering? Why the depression and the suicide attempts? The second question is to be or not to be, right? The very famous question. And this is a question I had for a lot of my life. What is the meaning of life? But let me reverse a bit. I was born and raised in Bozeman, Montana. I went to college back east and got a degree, a Bachelor of Science in Biology, Anthropology, and Philosophy. What are you going to do with that, you might ask? Well, the plan was that I was going to go back to school and become a veterinarian. And so I wanted a multidisciplinary degree. But what really happens is with that sort of degree is you sit around and you think, and then you think about your thinking, and then you're thinking too much, and then you're thinking about why you're thinking so much. And that's exactly what I did. And that's okay. So I moved back to Montana. I need a little respite from college, and I wanted to gain some experience in animal welfare and that sort of thing. So I started working for a very large animal shelter in Bozeman. And by the way, this is my buddy. His name is Forrest Jade. He wanted to be here with us today. But I started working for a very large animal shelter because I wanted experience. And I worked my way up from kennel tech to vet tech to surgical assistant, and eventually I became the feline supervisor and the feline behaviorist. And yes, there is such a thing as feline behavior. Cats speak very loudly and are less independent than we think if we just learn to listen. So right now I'm like the existential hero, right? Unfortunately, with that job came euthanasia. Now, this was a no-kill shelter, but we did euthanize animals for two reasons. One, they had to pass a medical test, and the second, they had to pass a behavioral test. And that was my department. So I had a license to kill in the state of Montana under the Board of Veterinary Medicine, but I could not give a simple rabies vaccine. What sense does that make? Needless to say, I couldn't reconcile this with my soul. I'm in this industry, in this animal welfare, to help animals and be a voice for the voiceless. And I couldn't reconcile it with my soul. This is the only profession where you actually kill your clients. This is where my unconditional love for animals, combined with my existential nature, came into major conflict. I lost all faith in humanity. I lost hope in everything and everyone, including myself. I always say that this was the needle that severed my soul, and it did. In 2008 is when I had my first suicide attempt. I used cutting, self-harm, and drinking as a way to cope with these feelings. I had several other serious suicide attempts. I was hospitalized 8 times in my life, 7 times through Yale New Haven Psychiatric, and 1 time at Montana State Hospital. Fortunately enough, I was lucky to be accepted into a DBT program through Yale New Haven Psychiatric Hospital. This was an 8-month intensive DBT program, and I think that this marks the beginning of my recovery. It was where there was a seed of hope that was planted for me. And at the time I was just surviving, but I had the idea in my head that there might be hope. There might be a chance for hope. Anyway, we had these recovery coaches, they were called DBT coaches, and we would call them daily and check in, talk about our emotions and what skills to use. And my DBT coach, her name was Marie Paul, and she was French, and she had this beautiful accent, and she always spoke in these beautiful metaphors. And I wish I had listened a little bit more, but there was one thing she had always said to me, and she would say, Kelly, the value of your pain and of your suffering is if and when you choose to share it. And at the time, it made no sense to me whatsoever. At the time, I was very suicidal. I was actively self-harming and drinking, and I couldn't see any value in what I was going through. But to me, that was the beginning of my recovery, and recovery is so authentic to me, and it's holistic, and it's different for everybody. I think it's a self-guided process of learning. It's a willingness to progress towards an individualized sense of self, wellness, well-being, and happiness, whatever that may entail. And so then I came back to Montana, and this is when I really started to get into recovery. I got all sorts of books and literature on my particular illness, educated myself on my medications and what would work and what wouldn't. I try, educating myself on what sorts of therapies would help with my depression and my trauma and my PTSD and things like that. And so I did all sorts of things. Like I said, I did DBT. I did psychotherapy, hypnotherapy. I still do EMDR and psychotherapy. Acupuncture was huge. So for me, it was a very holistic approach, but peer support was one that was in there that was so huge for me. It wasn't until I came to Montana that I came into contact with peer support. And to hear another person's story and where they were at mentally, and to see them now in recovery, glowing, really made me believe that recovery was possible. I'm not sure that I believed it before until I came into contact with peer support. So all these different forms of therapy and all these different people in my life, I was able to eventually answer my two questions. And the first question of why, well, it's an obvious reason. I'm a very sensitive person. I was born that way. I believe that I'm empathically inclined for a reason, and it directly relates to my role on this earth. My purpose right now, which I feel is to help others who are suffering as badly as I did. How could I possibly do that, help others who are suffering, if I had not suffered so badly myself? That's the why of it. That's peer support. And Marie Paul was right. There is value in my pain and my suffering. That is the value. That's what I do. That's peer support. I get to share my story with other people. I get to share in similar life experiences. I get to offer a message of hope that recovery is always possible. So the second question of to be or not to be, well, the obvious answer then is to be. If my purpose in life, which I truly believe, is to help others who are suffering, then I have to be alive. Death is no longer an option for me. I have to be here to share and to help. I am so passionate about recovery and about peer support and the peer support movement, and I want to be a part of it. I strongly identify with Montana's peer network, with their goals and their mission and all the things they do to have forward movement and forward change. And so I just want to leave you with this one last thing, and that's about hope. And this is from Emily Dickinson, and she says that hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, that sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all. Recovery is always possible, and there is much to hope for. Thank you for letting me share.